people talked, laughed, shared stories for almost an hour. Everything felt surprisingly peaceful. Then dessert arrived, and Richard stood up. Whenever Richard stood during family dinners, something unpleasant usually followed. He picked up his wine glass. "I'd like to make a toast." Everyone turned toward him. He smiled confidently. "You know, I've spent my entire life building businesses. I've learned that success isn't for everyone." A few guests nodded. Then he looked directly at me. "My stepson here has spent years chasing mysterious investment opportunities." He laughed. "I'm still waiting to see one actually work." The room erupted with awkward laughter. Someone across the table whispered, "Oh no." Richard wasn't finished. "Ethan always thought he was too smart to join the family company." He shrugged dramatically. "Now he's 30. No wife. No children. No real career. I suppose someone's got to prove what failure looks like." This time, even some of his own executives looked uncomfortable. I noticed my mother's hands trembling beneath the table. I could have argued. I could have defended myself. Instead, I quietly reached into my jacket and checked my phone. One new message. Acquisition complete. 58% ownership transferred. Closing finalized at 8:43 p.m. For a moment, I simply stared at the screen. Months of negotiations, lawyers, contracts, board approvals. It was finished. I slowly locked my phone. Richard raised his glass again. "Come on, Ethan. Say something." The room became silent. Every face turned toward me. I stilled, then calmly said, "Congratulations on your birthday, Richard. And congratulations on your new boss." His smile disappeared. "So what exactly is that supposed to mean?" I looked him straight in the eyes. "It means, as of 17 minutes ago, I'm the majority owner of Lawson Industrial Components." The sound of a wine glass slipping from someone's hand echoed across the restaurant. No one laughed this time. For several seconds, nobody moved, nobody spoke. Richard stared at me as if I'd started speaking another language. Then he laughed, a loud, confident laugh. "Very funny." He looked around the table. "Did everyone hear that? My stepson thinks he owns my company." A few people forced nervous smiles. No one else laughed. I calmly unlocked my phone and opened the email from our legal team. Without saying a word, I slid it across the table. Richard picked it up. His smile slowly faded. He read the first page, then the second. His hand stopped moving. "What is this?" "It's the finalized acquisition agreement. Our investment group purchased 58% of Lawson Industrial. Closing was completed at 8:43 tonight. You no longer own the controlling interest." The restaurant suddenly felt impossibly quiet. Even the servers had stopped walking. One of Richard's vice presidents slowly whispered, "He's telling the truth." Richard slammed the papers onto the table. "No. This isn't possible. I would have known." I shook my head. "No. You would have listened. You ignored every warning your investors gave you. You dismissed every financial advisor who disagreed with you. And when your largest shareholders wanted to sell, they didn't even call you. They called us." His face turned bright red. "They betrayed me," I answered calmly. "No, they lost confidence in your leadership. There's a difference." Across the table, one of the board members quietly cleared his throat. "I tried to tell you 6 months ago that the investors were becoming concerned." Richard turned toward him. "You said everything was under control." The man sighed. "I said it could be, if you were willing to change." My mother looked completely stunned. She turned toward me. "Ethan, you really bought the company?" I nodded, not to hurt anyone, to save it. I reached into my briefcase and placed another folder on the table. "This is the restructuring plan." I looked around the room. No layoffs, no factory closures, no cuts to employee health care. Instead, we're investing in new equipment, expanding production, and introducing profit-sharing bonuses. One of Richard's longtime factory managers looked like he might cry. "You mean nobody's losing their job?" I smiled. "Quite the opposite. We're hiring." The atmosphere in the room changed instantly. The fear disappeared. For the first time that evening, people looked hopeful. Richard stood up so suddenly his chair nearly fell over. "You can't do this. I built that company." I stood too. "Yes, you did. And no one can take that away from you. But building a company and leading it are two different things." He clenched his fists. "I'll fight this. You can. But every document has already been signed. The shareholders voted. The board approved it. The transaction is complete. He looked around the room, searching for someone, anyone, to defend him. No one did. Not a single person. That silence said more than words ever could. The following Monday was my first official board meeting. I walked into the same conference room where Richard had spent years making every decision alone. This time, everyone had a voice. The first agenda item surprised the entire room. I'd like to invite Richard to remain with the company. Several board members exchanged confused looks. Richard looked up. I continued. As a consultant. No executive authority. No control over hiring. No financial decisions. But his experience still has value. Richard stared at me. After everything he'd said, after years of insults, he couldn't understand why I wasn't trying to humiliate him. Finally, he spoke. Why? I answered honestly. Because this company deserves stability, and because revenge was never my goal. I wanted accountability, nothing more. Richard declined the offer. He quietly gathered the few personal belongings from his executive office later that week. As he walked through the factory one final time, something unexpected happened. Employees shook his hand. They thanked him for helping build the company. Then they returned to work. There was no cheering, no celebration, just respect for what he had once accomplished, and acceptance that it was time for someone else to lead. Sometimes, that's the hardest truth a person can face. A month later, my mother visited my office. She looked around quietly, then smiled. I've never seen employees this happy. I laughed. They're the reason the company succeeds. She nodded. After a long silence, she said something I'd waited nearly 20 years to hear. I'm sorry. I should have stood up for you. I let Richard convince me you would never amount to anything. I reached across the desk and squeezed her hand. We can't change the past, but we can choose what happens next. She smiled through tears. I'd like that. People often think the best revenge is watching someone lose everything. I disagree. The best revenge is proving them wrong without becoming like them. Richard spent years trying to convince everyone I was a failure. In the end, I didn't beat him with insults. I beat him with patience, preparation, and respect. Because real leadership isn't about making people fear you, it's about giving them a reason to believe in you. If this story kept you hooked until the very end, don't forget to like, subscribe, and let me know your thoughts in the comments. Tell me honestly, if you were in Ethan's position, would you have fired Richard immediately or given him the consulting role like I did? And if you're ready for another original Reddit-style revenge story packed with betrayal, shocking twists, and satisfying karma, click the next video on your screen. I'll see you there.